We have also taken the liberty of enhancing the overall aesthetics and beauty of your body in the future by adding a few special features. These special features give deformation and interpolation attributes to such properties as physical mass, form, and motion. In other words, your body and all its parts will behave more lifelike than ever before. I know this may sound a little confusing at the moment, but rest assured it all takes place in real time. So, what do you think about your future so far?
Well, I love what you've done with my figure, but I want to know more about this world tomorrow.
Sinclair, roll the environment demo. Sinclair. In order to create the illusion of depth, games of the past have had to resort to unwanted scaling tricks such as fog or darkness. Notice how the characters disappear as they move into the distance.
Oh, that's just terrible.
Sinclair. Thank you. Now see how smoothly the Messiah characters scale into the distance, completely eliminating the need for any scaling tricks. The Messiah engine solves this digital conundrum in real time.
Our little tour of the Messiah engine, and we hope to see you next time on Technologies of Tomorrow.
Okay, so here's SAXS. He's going to tell you about what he's been up to.
After this little light-hearted demonstration, it's my job to get technical. My name is Michael Persson. Everybody calls me SAXS for these reasons long forgotten. I have a BA in business. I'm not really very technical. I'm very graphics motivated. Started on the demo scene in Scandinavia when I was 12, and I was headhunted by a scavenger at some point. When they took a turn for the worse, I left with my team and founded Team Ego as Shiny Entertainment and hired another couple of artists, and we're now doing Messiah, which I'm the lead programmer of. We're trying to, with Messiah, to address all the problems that are facing all developers today. Like, the common problem is that everybody wants the newest stuff. Everybody comes up with screenshots. Everybody sees the screenshots in the magazines, all the pre-rendered shots, and they want the features to be in the game today. Like, little did they know it was all rendered in Max. We have to incorporate bump mapping all of a sudden. Now there's specular mapping, thumb mapping. Like, how do you generate an engine that can actually handle that? Everybody's discussing the engine war, like who has the best engine. It's like Kung Fu movies. My Kung Fu is better than your Kung Fu. It doesn't really make sense. We're trying to address all the problems of, like, polygons per second, texture sizes, screen resolution, alpha this, light that, in a little more, in a new fashion, in a more scalable fashion. We're trying to be ahead of the game, because, like, it's always the technical design review you do when you start the game never ends up being the game. Like, how do you do deadlines when the game is constantly changing, the engine is constantly changing, and how do you try to incorporate that? The other thing is that, like, you have to do all these tools for artists. Everybody wants artist freedom. On the other hand, you have to do it so fast. What if your engine doesn't get licensed? Like, how do you address that? How do you do it fast enough? And how do you make sure that all your tools carry over into the next generation of software? And the other thing is the spread of machines right now. Like, for Messiah, for example, everybody wants it to look brilliant on a 400 MHz dual Pentium with a dual Voodoo 2. On the other hand, we have to do a PlayStation port of it. And it doesn't exactly make it easy from a design standpoint. That how do we make it so we don't have to do the exact same game twice? How do we plan for something that we don't know exactly how long it's gonna take? We've never done it before, but we still have to come up with the sensible deadlines. Of course, the obvious answer is scalability. Like, if you try to generate your engine from the beginning with that in mind, that you have to have an enormous spread, you're going to come up a lot better and better prepared for the future. But for our purposes, we're very character focused, and we figured most of our time is going to be spent on characters anyways, in rendering them. We wanted a lot of characters on screen, and we wanted it to look as good as the good old 2D games where you had pre-rendered sprites. We want the same time with crispness in the characters. So the first solution was to go to voxels. The voxel seemed like a sensible solution. You could have something that reminded you of sprites. You could rotate around it, and it looked okay. And we did that on the Saturn way back. And then everybody goes, "No, that's great. Let's zoom in on the face." And that's when the processor died. Then we tried to store the models in different levels of detail for the voxels. And the only thing we came up with was that our storage capacity was just quickly filling out on the consoles, at least. So at some point it became obvious that we had to shift to a new storage format that wouldn't be voxels, but that would still keep the same type of crispness in it. After a while, I started shifting over to using shapes instead for the models, where you basically use the exact same model representation as you have for voxels. But instead of just drawing the voxels pixel by pixel, you try to analyze the model instead. And try to make a curve fitting on top of the model with certain restrictions, and you're then generating your shapes on top of it. When you have nice shapes like patches, it's trivial to go in and tessellate it. Even on a PlayStation, you're not going to have much problem on runtime. So that realization was a big one. But then the execution proved to take a lot longer than expected. Then it was the bones issue. Like, everybody wanted more animation. When we did the voxel stuff, we had the pre-stored animation frames in voxels. And everybody said, that's great, but if we have 5 different walk cycles, how can we interpolate between them? And we're going nowhere. So we settled for using a bone solution instead. Then new problems arose. We had no way of controlling the bones. We tried using Bones Pro and Max, and it was not giving us any of the results we wanted. Like, the mathematical solution to applying the bones and not having a control down to a pixel level proved to be way too little to actually translate the motion capture into the model. So we went ahead and wrote some tools for it instead ourselves that basically works on the surface instead of working with the big areas of influence. Then the other thing, like getting the data into the system, we needed a renderer that could actually support this. So I made a 3D Studio compatible renderer that takes the model, the high-res model from, like, the biggest one we have is 550,000 polygons. It renders that model and generates the surface of it, get rid of all the inside polygons. So the artists don't have to worry about sitting there and booleaning the entire model. It removes the backside of eyes, inside of stockings, boots that go over the skin, all that stuff, and gives you a perfect surface instead. When you have, the better the surface you have, the easier you're going to have when you try to compress it. So then there's the other thing, that's the background. For that we settle for using quad compressed light maps, so you can instead of just having a standard resolution light map that's lower resolution than your texture, why not have a light map that actually adapts to the amount of detail in the shadow on that face, and we combine that with Garo instead. So you have certain threshold, and it just assigns priorities to the polygons where you have sharp edge shadows, gets rid of some of the soft edge shadows, and you end up having to spend much less texture memory on the light maps actually, and you get light maps that look infinitely better because you can get a lot more detail into it. Everything from the rendering pretty much translates into it. So for the backgrounds itself, we gave up. That was too much. Adaptive detail on the background, we didn't really see any good solutions for that. Like, the only thing I've seen is adaptive detail stepping up on flat polygons like a bump map, but it doesn't really add anything to geometry. You're still not going to generate like a dome ceiling or anything like that looks like a real architect would have built it. It's still going to look basically flat. When you walk up to it, it might have a little dent in it, but it's not really going to make a big difference. So we kind of just stayed away from it and tried to build our backgrounds in a sensible manner instead. And then put the tessellation in on the characters instead. And that way focusing on getting as many characters on screen as possible. Let me show you some of the... Oops. Are we on? Yeah. Where's it at? This is one of the characters from the game that happens to be a prostitute. Just get rid of these tools. Here you can see after the rendering has gotten a hold of her. Everything is done in Max, including the lighting. The artist takes it, sets it up, put it in a neutral position, and I take it and scan it and turn it into a shape instead. At this point, it's basically a stream of what you could say is like voxels, but they're interconnected. So if you look at them close up, you can see like all these streams of pixel information. That's what I used to use for the voxels. Then the challenge was to fit a surface on top of this that can be tessellated really fast. So to do that, we figured out we have to separate the body into body parts, or there's no other way of breaking it up into patch surfaces that would be easy to render. The side effect of this was that now you can assign different priorities to different body parts and worry about the places you really care about. So you can have high resolution on the face, step down the resolution on the legs and on the arm, where you are not likely to focus anyways. So we take this model and then we define inside of it. We put in these paths. I don't know if it's obvious of the step down the resolution of the model. Inside the model, we have these, what you can see where the purple thing and the other purple thing down there is this one and this one. That's a path for that body part defined. That basically defines what way your curved surface is going to run. I take that curve and I render following the path and projecting outwards and generating what could be it's the same as a cylinder map essentially. After you do that, you now have six body parts with your patch information. So that's all good. Now for the animation part of it. What we did was this. This is the body, and you can select a bone. Just could see this one. Like this, and you assign the influence to it on a bone-by-bone basis by spraying the influence essentially on like an airbrush on the surface itself. So if you zoom in on her and start moving her, you can see exactly how she deforms. In the orange areas is where we have 100% influence from the upper thigh bone. Then the red area spreading towards blue is where the influence wears off. And if you see a bug in it, you can see how there's points that's sticking out on the back of her bun, I guess. See this one. It's not really designed for this low-res monitor anyway. So, there you go. For some reason. You can go in and you can start painting on the body, and you can pull out the vertices until it looks good, and you have a proper deformation on her back. Now I messed her up, obviously. So, but if you look at her now, you can see how she's breaking apart in the bun area. So what we do is like we load in a bunch of animation to each character. We play all the animation for them, and we look at, does the body deform correctly? Like, is the squeeze correct? Is the muscles correct? And we have an artist sitting there and doing that. And then when it's all said and done, we just apply any information to it, and voila, we have a model with all the muscle information intact, essentially coming from the bones. So then on top of that, we needed to find a way to merge in bones, or merge in standard polygon objects, because not everything is fit for a curved surface. Like you don't want everything to be just this tube-like substance. You want to have hard-edged areas like the baby, like the baby's wing, for example. You see, we just attach the baby's wings like normal polygons to it, but they get treated with the same bone influences from everything. It's going away, isn't it?
Yeah.
Come on. Okay. So you spray in the influences on the normal polygon objects also, and they get treated like polygons in the engine, and then the body just keeps tessellating up and down. So then next step is to do the proper separation, because we're dealing with points. You're bound to get jagged edges no matter what you do. So in order to fix this, let's get it straight. In order to fix it, we put in the map paths. If you can see the planes that are cutting him for the body parts, like this. Here's these planes that are cutting down here and here and here and there. And that's separating the body and generating geometric information that lies between the two body parts. If you try to connect two tube cylinders, you're always going to end up with a jagged edge no matter what you do, especially when you start tessellating. You're going to see gaps opening up all over the place. So a big challenge was to try to close those gaps with little overhead in processing time. And the plane solution seemed to be the best solution. So you just put in the points, and you go to the body part you want to do, the leg, for example, and then you do this one, and it does a nice separation between the leg and generates the two body parts. You can see the line is now perfect. So, okay, this apart. We take this, we generate the mesh, and this is how it looks. Let's see if I can find that. This is the prostitute you just saw before, after she's been converted. If you look at the wireframe of her, you can easily see the different resolutions on the different body parts, where the head has considerably more polygons than the legs, for example. A nice thing about putting in the projection paths inside the legs is that you can have variable resolution throughout the body part also by scaling the time of the spline. So you can see we just chose to have more information in the bend area of the boot than at the upper thigh area where not much is happening anyways. So if you take this model and we start playing her, right now she's about, get this out of the way. She's about 6,368 faces at the bottom, which is extensive. But if we take her and zoom it down a little bit, start stepping on her, like this, just watch the number down, and now it's down to 2,900 polygons. If you look at the model up on the screen, as I step it, you can see it's just removing the polygons from her and making her simpler and simpler so it can deal with pretty much any engine. So as soon as the character starts disappearing into the distance, we start stepping down the amount of polygons that we put into to each character heavily. So that means it goes from being close to the screen at about 2,000 polygons on a peak machine to when it's far away about 30 polygons, depending on what type of model it is, which makes for that you can have considerable more polygons on the screen at the same time. So if you take this girl, you zoom it down and start stepping on her, you can see now we get down to 700 polygons. And as you have it in the game anyways, it usually makes out that you're not going to have too many characters that are going to be up too close anyways, that it's going to be spaced out, otherwise the gameplay is going to get cluttered. So we end up with an average of amount of polygon way under what you could expect. We're averaging around 225, 250 polygons per character if you have a normal scene of up to about 20 characters on screen. But that means, like on my P200 that I work on, we can have 20 characters on screen at about 20 frames a second with a full background rendered. And on a peak machine like a 400 like this one that we're demoing on, you can go much higher, but it still keeps a frame rate at the exact same. So then another advantage by doing the shape thing is that you can, if you have a limited machine where you can't really afford to generate a new model every frame, it generates the level of details for you instead. So you can ask for a model on the PlayStation, for example, if you know that your character is going to be close to the screen all the time. Ask for a model in a specific resolution, and you just get it. And the only thing that has to be applied to it is just a rotation. And there it goes. Show you some of the other characters. One of the great things with the engine is that you can make most obscene things happen, and it's still going to look fine. This guy is one of the male prostitutes. Strutting his stuff. But the deformation works on him the exact same way. Like we just take the female motions and we just apply them to him. Another thing we can do is we can apply priorities to singular points. If we bring up Bob. You can assign singular points to an area of the body. For example, the nose. So you're not going to lose any information for that nose. So if you look at it from the side, as it's stepping away, it's always going to try to keep that nose alive, no matter what. So, and it's just going to generate polygons around it to make up for it, pretty much. That just makes for a much more stable mesh than what you usually see in level of detail, because you just select some extremities that are very important for the shape of the model, and you prioritize them, and then it's just going to try to get around it by generating the polygons around them instead. And that way you can step it much lower than we used to be able to do before. So, Okay, let's try and apply this to the actual engine then. This is the wrong one. This is the example of putting it into Messiah. I can't find it. This one. Okay. Switch to the other source. This is Bob. Flap his little wings. See this. Some of the environments, all the environments have been rendered with the same light setting as we had in 3 Studio exactly. The only thing that I do is just apply limited texture resolution, but everything else is just rendered the exact same way. All the shadows are cast from the light sources in the scene. Go out again. Spawn a character. You see the shadow on the ground and the light on her. Everything that's in here you get for free pretty much from the bone system. The only thing you do is you apply a flatten rotation to the bone matrix, and you get your shadow for free. You just project it onto where you know her feet are going to be anyways, and you get the shadow for free. For the lighting information, because we're dealing with a per tube cylinder essentially, generating the normals you can do on the fly and still get away with it, so there's no storage information for the normals. There's just a flag and you can ask for it, and it just generates them for you. The volumetric lighting inside the game is another neat feature. Because you have the tube design of the model, where everything is a cylinder again, for each time you render a segment of that tube, if you just look for lighting information for that segment, you're going to be plenty fine. So as you walk into the shadow, it's easy to fade her out. So it looks like her body parts are being lit one by one, and there's little overhead. The table is basically, you set a resolution for a room, and it just renders the light values in certain areas. I just project it into the model, and you get your light values for free. So let's try this one. This is an example of how many characters can actually be fit on the screen. You'll notice when it first comes in, it'll start degrading everything because it thinks it's running too slow because of the loading. But as soon as every character is on screen, it can start stabilizing, and it just keeps generating the meshes over and over again. Right now I'm generating one mesh per frame, and then it's just updating. There's 20 characters on screen right now, and it's running at 28 frames a second, because that's the target resolution. Whoops. So as you fly over them, they just keep updating. If you have a faster machine, you can ask for faster updates on the LEDs also. So it'll always keep it at a steady frame rate. If you go to, where's the other one? To some of the environments, we chose not to use the standard BSP approach. We used what's essentially a modified portal instead, where instead of just having, we're basically storing every room as a separate entity and then just putting up the portals manually to generate better working portals. It makes it a lot easier to stream from the hard drive when you do it that way. Another reason why we didn't want the BSP was for the flexibility of the background mesh. We didn't want to have, we didn't want to not be able to move any object we wanted and get into trouble with sorting and backfacing and everything. That's the streaming video stuff. Basically, it's just streaming a flick file of the hard drive. Because we're using a Fear Factory for music, for example, we have like the music video stuff, and we can just put them up on the monitors. Like anything that anybody wants to get in. Like we have people that help on the game for no real money, and the only thing they get is just advertising on the monitors, basically. So there's some of the other scenes. If I go up here, by cheating a little bit, part of the particle stuff. You can see down there all the big cylinders. Everything that's moving in the engine is being rendered real time with the lights. So you get nice lighting information no matter how big it is. These ones you have to traverse. See if I can get off that. And I'm going to get squished. That's it for me. Hold on. In terms of weapons, another reason why like the BSP approach didn't really appeal to us was we wanted to have like strange weapons, like weapons that didn't really fit in anywhere, but where it just looks cool. Like we did this one, for example. If I can find a guide to dive into. Essentially, like Dave explained, you dive into the bodies of your enemies. Right now, they are very passive and just going to wait to get taken over. You dive into them. It's like, oh no, what came in? You can run around these guys. Then throw. Have geometry modifiers. Like you can add geometry modifiers and light modifiers to everything. So it basically works like a magnet, where you can move the magnet in the room, attracting or pushing the geometry away from you. This one is a distortion bomb that kills everything that's inside. We'll just get it over this guy, that guy, and you can just make him fly off. If you look at the polygon count, in this one, if you look at the polygon count on each character, it's easy to see the advantages of the tessellation, because right now Bob is set up at 774 polygons. That's going towards a target rate of 30 frames a second. But because this is a 400, if I just do this one and do the target rate to 30 frames a second, all of a sudden it puts him up to 2200 polygons. So you just set your frame rate and it just upgrades him, and the difference is not really noticeable. It's just a slight difference. This one, if you look at the card that keeps falling down over there, as you go closer, I don't know if you can see the numbers on screen. Yeah, he just steps up the number of polygons as you walk past him, and generally they end up having a lot less than what you would expect them to. Just cheat and get him in here. This is another guy. This is just a modified one of the light modifiers. Just attach it to a laser beam instead. This guy is just blinding you when he's looking at you. He's just trying to track you down with his laser visor. So, but that's essentially it for the character system. So, Dave?
Just to finish off, can you put my mic back on one sec? Just to finish off, we really, I mean, you can see how hard SAXS has been working. He was the only programmer that did all the tools and the 3D engine as well. Finally, we got him some help that can actually work at his level. But basically, we're really just touching on the beginning of scalable technology. We have a lot of ideas for other games that we still are going to be incorporating. So really, Shiny at the minute is investing very heavily into the future, and I would urge you to do the same. I'd also urge everyone to consider the world market when you're making engines, because you're going to have a lot of people that never get a chance to see your games. So basically, if you do find the better solution than this, please come up here next year and explain it all to us. So thanks very much. If you have any questions, we're going to stay here for about another 15 minutes or so. So we'd welcome you to come up and ask whatever you want. Thanks very much. That was good. That was very good.